All right, everyone, welcome to City Hall. It is Tuesday, October 18th, 2022, and you are joining the Athens-Clarke County Commission and myself, the mayor, for two meetings tonight, a special called session that we will commence in just a moment, and then our regularly scheduled agenda setting session for items that will be considered the first Tuesday of November. For the purpose of the special called session, I would ask if Clerk Spratling could call roll for us, please.
Davenport.
Here.
Lane.
Here.
Wright.
Present.
Benson.
Here.
Poole.
Here.
Edwards.
Here.
Myers.
Here.
Thornton. Here. Andy.
Here.
We have a quorum.
All right, thank you, Madam Clerk. All right, given that we have two items of new business on our special called session, I do need a motion for suspension of rules. Do I hear such a motion?
So moved. Second.
All right, I have a motion from Commissioner Davenport, a second from Commissioner Houle for suspension of rules. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, hearing none, motion carries, and we'll move on to the two items of substance. First is the SPLOST 2020 Project 3, which is the Classic Center Arena, and this regards the solar energy procurement agreement and construction services. We, of course, have a prospective agreement with Cherry Street, who've been providing solar service at a number of projects locally out of Macon. I would entertain a motion regarding this item.
Motion to approve.
Public input.
I'll second.
Oh, yes, I guess Madam Clerk reminds me we do have opportunity for public input. If anyone would like to speak to either item of new business, one or two, now is that time. Good evening.
Good evening to the mayor, the commissioners, city managers. I just want to say thank you, in reverse. I'm trusting that, you all, would do the right thing. You normally do. You dove destined. Many of you have visited our camps. You visited, you just know our programming. So I just want to say thank you on behalf of the 40 families who really benefited from the camp this summer. Many of those families would not have been able to have their children anywhere. And we even had to turn some families away. And so I want to say thank you, and I want us to continue to provide funding for such programs for young people who would not be able to afford otherwise to attend a summer camp that provides academic support as well as social support. Because many of our children, not many, a few of our children had some real social and behavior issues. And we were able to work with the Black Therapist Collective to get those families some support that, once again, they would not be able to afford. So I just want to say thank you. I sent you all a very detailed letter of my thoughts, and I ask that you please take that, to heart, because, we really, need more support for the small nonprofits. So that's all I will say today. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Maddox. Appreciate that very much. Is there anyone else here to speak to either item of new business on the special called session? This is the Classic Center Arena or the Youth Development Program. All right, hearing none, we'll return to discussion. So do I hear a motion regarding Classic Center Arena Solar Project?
Motion to approve. I'll second.
All right, we've got a motion from Commissioner Myers. Who is the second?
Bovita. Commissioner Thornton.
Thank you. All right. All right, Commissioner Myers.
Yeah, I'm really happy to support this. The SEPA's an agreement with a private investor. In this case, it's Cherry Street Energy to put solar on top of our new arena and parts of the existing Classic Center to produce solar energy at some predetermined rates that work on the agreement there. This is going on in Macon Bibb, City of Atlanta, Emory University, and even at our own Terrapin has used Cherry Streets. So I'm really excited about this. I want to thank Paul Kramer and his team for following through on the recommendations that Andrew Saunders back in his sustainability position, I believe, put together a couple of years ago, as well as the work of the 100% Athens Renewable Group, who advocated for this. I'm really glad to see this, and I'm happy to be behind the rail to support this.
Thanks, Commissioner. Commissioner Thornton?
I think I'm just going to ditto everything Commissioner Myers said. It's been a long time, and not a long time, but it's been a time, and we're trying to move into this other level of solar and the benefits of solar. So I think this is a huge step for the county, and probably will be a model for other projects down the road.
Any other input from members of the body? Commissioner Link?
Yeah, I just want to thank all who worked on this, and, I look forward to getting one step closer to our 100% renewable goals, and, point out that this facility is probably going to be one of the highest use facilities in the county, and to see that it's getting a big substantial solar array will really help offset those energy uses.
Any others? All right, there is a motion and a second on the floor. Motion from Commissioner Myers, second from Commissioner Thornton. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, hearing none, motion carries. All right, go forth and do well. All right, second item on tonight's agenda regards a modification to terms of our youth development program to provide funding for the completed program that was referenced podium. I'd entertain a motion regarding this item.
Yeah, I want to make a motion to approve the execution of the contract with the First AME Church so that they can receive the payment of $30,000 for the summer program they had this past year.
Right,
I'll
I've got
second.
Motion from Commissioner Myers, second from Commissioner Link. Further comment, Commissioner Myers?
Yeah, I just, I regret that we've had so many lessons to learn on this, but when you try to do things differently and new, there are lots of lessons to learn. I think we as a commission learned that we need to give staff and everyone involved more time. And I believe you'll see on the agenda that for our agenda setting that we're actually going to move forward with a summer 2023 program here and vote on that in November rather than waiting till next May. So that will help things out a bunch from our end. I think that that ECC has learned a lot about this process and helping make all the requirements even clearer. I will say that there's a lot of clarity in what they provided. And, we can avoid sending mixed messages and just be real clear in what we're doing. I know that Dr. Maddox, in her email that she referenced, pointed out the lessons that the nonprofits and the nonprofits that partnered with nonprofits who got the grant, that they also had lots of lessons to learn. I have some specific items from looking over this that I'll forward later on to the manager. But I think at this point that we have so much that we have learned on this moving forward that this is not, we're going to set up a different process so that we won't be in this situation again. So for that matter, I'm pushing forth, supporting the payment of this execution of this contract.
Commissioner Link, and then I'll return to Manager Williams.
I think Commissioner Myers covered it pretty well. We had this injection of a lot of funds that we wanted to get out into the community as quickly as possible. So we had that kind of warp-speeded RFP process, and I want to thank Dr. Maddox and the folks at Destin for all the good work they do in the community. It's really important, and they've been doing it at it a long time and have had tremendous results. So it's certainly a worthy program, and like Commissioner Myers said, we've learned some things about the process, and we want to improve it to assure that the many worthy organizations in our community can access these funds, in the current environment, the current litigious environment that we exist in.
Manager Williams, follow up.
Yes, and if you would like to accomplish this, rather than the action being just to award the execution of the contract, we put some language in there as an option.
Do you mean to approve the lowering of the SAM coverage
Right,
threshold to
because
300?
then we would be right
Yes.
back where we started with the insurance not being,
Yes.
So in order to effectively do what you'd like to do, I would suggest you make a strategic lowering of that for this one time, and then we can do everything else.
Well, let me amend that language. I was just trying to make it
You agree,
shorter for the brevity. To approve the lowering of the SAM coverage threshold to 300,000 for this one time to enable the First AME Church to be able to execute the contract and receive payment of 30,000 for the summer camp activities conducted in the summer of 2022.
Commissioner Link, you're agreeable to
Yes,
that language?
yes, definitely.
Perfect. All right. Commissioner Wright?
Yeah, that's in our agenda, that's option 2.
That's
correct.
right.
It's in
that's
there.
right.
So as
Option
far
two.
as
Thank
people
you.
who have this document out there.
Yes.
It's listed as option 2 under the options.
Okay.
So- and-
Exactly. All right. Any further input? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, hearing none, motion carries unanimously. All right, thanks all. Given that that is the second of our 2 special called session items, I need a motion to adjourn special called session.
So moved.
All right, I've got a motion from Commissioner Wright and a second from Commissioner Denson to adjourn the special called session. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, special called session is adjourned, and we're going to move on to our agenda-setting session. And rules of public input are comparable to those that we just experienced for the special called session. There'll be several opportunities for public input, an opportunity on the consent agenda, an opportunity on old and new business, and then separate opportunities on each of the 2 planning and zoning items. In each case, opportunity is limited for public input to 3 minutes. You'll see the light in front of Clerk Spratlin, and it will turn green when you begin speaking, yellow when you have 30 seconds remaining, and red when your 3 minutes has expired. Is there any commissioner, as we begin the night, who would like to remove an item from consent agenda and move it to discussion? Commissioner Link?
North Chase, just for a quick comment. Number 2, sorry.
Okay. Any others?
Actually, 1, 4, and 6 for quick comments.
Okay, 1, 4, and 6. Any others?
Number 5.
All right, anyone want to dive in on 3 or 7?
Let it
All
run.
right, so, members of the public, if you are in the chamber and you would like to speak to either of the 2 consent agenda items, which are now 3 and 7, now is that time. Is that time? All right, so, if any member of the public would now like to speak to any item of old and new business, which are any other items other than 3, 7, 22, and 23, anything other than 3, 7, 22, and 23, 3, 7, 22, and 23, now is that time. Come on down, let your voice be heard. So just let us know which item you're speaking to. If you could hand that card to Attorney Drake, who's right in front of you, you can get that for the record.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
I have to check my scorecard for the number. I am looking at 13.
Okay. Just give us your name for the record.
My name is Tim B. Musturfer. I live at 200 Kearney Lake Road in Winterville. Okay, ready to start?
Yeah.
Okay. As you know, I've been very critical of and still hold some significant concerns about the decision-making process used by Athens-Clarke County for this section of the Firefly Trail. However, and I wish it were not so, I must now conclude that I have neither sufficient political nor financial capital to challenge that decision. I speak today not to support or rebut the agenda item, but rather to remind you of the severity of impacts to some property owners and your responsibility to mitigate them. Allow me to highlight just a few that affect my family personally. The trail will slice through my backyard in very close proximity to my home. Trail users will have uncomfortably clear views of my kitchen and bedroom windows, backyard, and deck. Trail construction will remove the mature tree cover and vegetative screening between my home and adjacent homes, a screening that will take decades to replace. Trail construction will remove the visual and sound buffers between my home and Moores Grove Road, a road that the commission decided was too heavily traveled and dangerous to approve an alternative trail alignment. The trail as proposed will segment my property, creating an island of inaccessible and unusable land that I will not be compensated for. Trail construction will expose my family to a year of heavy construction activity, the sound of chainsaws, chippers, bulldozers, graders, Dump trucks and vehicle backup alarms will be incessant sunup to sundown all summer long. My request tonight is that you honor prior commitments to ease the hardship caused by the trail on severely affected property owners. As part of this request, I urge you to reflect upon the painful lessons learned from Lynn and Town and embrace your ethical responsibility to compensate people fairly for the negative impacts caused by eminent domain for public projects. Okay, you can act upon my request by, number one, making meaningful offers of compensation to affected property owners that provide sufficient means to recover some of the privacy and serenity values lost by trail construction. Number two, negotiating in good faith. Direct the project team not to intentionally offer lowball compensation proposals, place unrealistic deadlines on negotiations, request unnecessary counteroffers, or propose to meet reasonable requests halfway for the sole sake of saving money. And number three, and most importantly, by showing compassion. Some property owners are giving much against their will to make this project a reality. Don't pour salt in their wounds by cheating them on the compensation they need and deserve.
Thank you, Mr.
End of
Stafford.
statement.
Other speakers to either old or new business tonight, so that's anything other than 3, 7, 22, or 23. You go, Judd. Good evening.
Good evening. I'm Ann Bunce. I live at 250 Kearney Lake Road. We live next door to Tim Beamersdorfer, and I agree with everything he has to say. And it affects us even more than it does him. I am not against the Firefly Trail. We are Firefly Inc. members, my husband and I. I use the trail regularly along the Winterville section. And I use it along with mothers pushing strollers, many children, walkers, recreational cyclists, and so forth. This is recreation. It is not transportation. There are no motor vehicles allowed. The true and serious bike people tend to use the streets rather than the trail because it is so congested and slow. There are no motor vehicles allowed. Speed limit is 15 miles an hour. It doesn't suit their needs. So it is then recreational. And you remember the March 21 session, 2021 session that related to the various routes for this section of the trail. The biking community people who did their speaking stood up and called it recreational, not transportational, and that's in the records, because we were at the meeting and heard it. Eminent domain is not for recreation, it is for transportation. Using eminent domain will not change the recreational aspect of the trail in this area. It will not turn it into transportation. Using eminent domain is just wrong for this section of the trail. And in spite of pressure to vote yes to use eminent domain, it is still wrong, and I believe most of you actually understand that. So may your decisions to vote, whether yes or no, sit well on your consciences. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Bunce. Other speakers to old or new business tonight?
I'm Paul Bunce, 250 Kearney Lake Road. I am a member of Firefly Inc., have been for a number of years. I am on the Winterville Local Action Committee for the Firefly Trail. There should be 3 criteria used for any project of this nature: safety of the users, cost, community benefit. The route that has been picked so far fails on all 3 of these criteria, which is why we are now here discussing the use of eminent domain. We have been to every Firefly meeting for years, all the public discussions. We had been told repeatedly in the past that eminent domain would never be considered for this. that if some landowners didn't wish to contribute at this point, the project would wait, maybe the heirs would get into it. Well, what we have found is that in order to authorize the use of eminent domain, this recreational project has been relabeled as a transportation project. Well, that's interesting. Relabeling things. You can call a cat a dog, but can you make that cat bark? I think not. This has been tried in Wisconsin on a Firefly project, and eventually they couldn't make their recreational cat bark like a transportation dog. So when you're considering eminent domain here, can you make your recreation cat bark like a transportation dog? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bunce. Other speakers on either old or new business?
My name's Wes Thompson. I'm the Vice President of the Professional Firefighters at Athens-Clarke County, and I'd like to speak to number 14. Station 5 is, I believe, the oldest station in the county now, and being stationed there a few years, we need it. Those guys, it's you can only do so much to it. The lot's kind of hard sometimes to get in and out of, and the building itself is quite dated. So we're here to support the passing of number 14 for Station 5. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Thompson. Evening.
Hello. Hey. Hopefully my voice will make it through this. I'm Emily Thompson, president of our Professional Firefighters of Athens-Clarke County, and I'm here also in support of the item 14 that's needed, and the guys they're excited about it. So, yeah, we're here to support it. Thank you.
Thank you, Emily. Any others here to speak to either old or new business? All right, we'll go ahead and move to commission discussion. We'll begin with item number 1, which Commissioner Myers, you asked for discussion regarding. So I'll turn it over to you.
Yeah, I actually, when going through these items, with two of the items that had to do with public safety, I do have a couple of questions on this one, but I did want to remove them just because I think they get lost. And we've received a lot of criticism in recent months about not being supportive of the police department and UGA, and I think this is an opportunity to show that support. This is an increase of another $100,000 from UGA to help with this, if it's my understanding, and then we're changing the contract as well. And I just really wanted to thank the staff and UGA for working together on this. I know there's been a lot of concern about safety downtown, and I am really appreciative of that. I did want to ask something. If in the facts and issues it mentions 27 cameras that we're presently using. Are those all in downtown?
Yes, and just to be clear, so, there's a downtown district, if you will,
Right.
through the DDA, but this is a build-out that will be downtown and then on the periphery of downtown, too. So we're starting, I think, moving both, west and to the northeast as well.
Okay, thank you. And we have, my reading of this is that we haven't spent the first 250. We're upping this, and then it'll all go out together. Is that correct?
I don't know, I can find out, Commissioner Myers, if how much has been spent to date, but we haven't spent all of it, I know that for sure, and this would augment that.
Okay, so some of the project has already started, put in place.
Well, at the very least, and if y'all remember, after the university gave the initial allocation, it was agreed upon that Chief Sproul, Chief Silk would help determine some of the locations that were beneficial, and they've done that part. And I do believe some cameras have been purchased and begun to be installed, but I'll verify that for you.
Thank you.
Is that it, Commissioner Myers?
Yes.
Yeah. Commissioner Hamby?
So out of the 27 cameras that are downtown right now, are all of them working?
I don't believe all of them are working, Commissioner Hamby, but I think most of them are. And some of this had to do with the Clayton Street project as well, where we had some cameras that were down, and then those have been recently installed. But I'll give you all an update on what's been installed and how much money's been spent today.
Sure. I just remember before Clayton Street was not being worked on, there were a lot of cameras out that were downtown.
I appreciate you bringing that up, because you're right. We had some old pan, tilt, and zoom cameras. Some of them were out of date. We didn't have the money for the parts. And that has changed. The police, we with some resources you've allocated and with the university's partnership, we've been able to, and with the Clayton Street, I will say with the Clayton Street, some of the SPLOST funds were used to pay for the cameras, so we're much better off than we were a year ago, so thank you for bringing that up.
We have about 5 cameras.
Okay, staff's telling me that we have 5 cameras down out of 27.
Commissioner Houle?
Yeah, I'm just curious, unless there's an incident to investigate, is the footage deleted or destroyed after a certain amount of time? The data collected?
My understanding is yes, that, and I also want to clarify too, these cameras, we don't have the staff to watch them. We just don't. And so I believe there is a temporary loop, maybe 24, 48 hours, if something happens and we can access the footage, but I don't think we're storing it all. And if I will let you know either way the status of that.
Okay. Yeah, I'm happy with this staying on consent, but my understanding is that's the case. I would just be concerned if somehow there was a vault of footage of people that was somehow able to be accessed down the road. So my understanding is that's not the case, and I just like to have that confirmed. Thanks.
Commissioner Edwards?
Well, I mean, I'm okay with a vault of footage. I don't want it to be sold to Mark Zuckerberg or Elon Musk or somebody. It stays in our control, right? Thank you.
Yes. Now, as part of the partnership, of course, we share the data and the footage with the university, but that's the only entity I'm aware of that would be shared with, other than an open records if it was applicable.
Which you have to keep for a certain number of years.
Is everybody okay with this on consent, sort of pending receipt of some of the follow-up information via email?
I'd actually like to leave it off so that when there's, I really want the public to know, and when there are more people in City Hall, to know that we are supporting our police department and working with UGA.
All right.
I have a question.
Commissioner Wright?
Is this not the same agenda item that didn't pass
This is
previously?
different.
Because I'm not seeing that in history.
This
No.
is different.
Okay. Okay.
That was regarding
This agenda
right-of-way
item
versus
did
fiber
pass
line.
before, yes. It was I think the fiber request of the university that did not.
Yeah.
And actually, I don't think it
was just put on
failed, it was
hold.
just delayed, yeah. Ultimately.
And then they withdrew their request.
Right.
Okay. I just wanted to say that sometimes putting things on the consent agenda allows the public to know that we agree with it versus leaving it questionable that we're going to maybe not support it. So if you want to speak to it again, I would hope that maybe we could leave it on the consent agenda so that this time frame before we vote on it, we're agreeable,
Yes,
if
and-
we're agreeable, and then maybe speak to it again if you want to before we vote. But sometimes when things get pulled off consent, it leads our partners to think that we're maybe not supportive.
Well, let me ask for a point of order clarification, if that's the right term to use. Is there an opportunity to speak to the consent agenda items?
So generally speaking, if something's on consent, it doesn't receive comment unless it's, again, removed from consent. It's been protocol the entire time I've been either a commissioner or mayor that any single commissioner desiring to leave something off consent so as to make comment at the voting meeting then creates that being on the old and new business agenda. But to Commissioner Wright's point, generally speaking, if something is on consent, it's recognized as sort of commonly desired.
You can talk about it at the end.
I can talk about it at the end. I'll talk about it at the end.
You can take it off again at the voting station.
Yeah.
Can
Just
we-
talk about it at the end.
Okay.
We'll give a highlight.
We can leave it on the consent agenda.
Let's leave it on consent.
All
Thank
right.
you.
I can-
Thank you. I'll
thank
remind
you.
you, if you want me to, that you want to.
Many
say
roads
that.
to Timbuktu, my friends. All right, we're going to keep it on consent. All right, moving on to item 2. Commissioner Link, you asked for some discussion of the North Chase Street parking prohibition.
Yeah, I just want to clarify that this was a request made to me by the folks at Ebenezer Baptist Church. the Chase Street, that portion of Chase Street only allows parking on one side because of the width of the street. And that side is opposite the church. This would make it, by moving the parking adjacent to the church side of the street, it would make it a lot safer for their attendees to access the church. And there's about to be some huge redevelopment in this immediate area. This is the lot where the varsity was. So, it's very likely we're going to see some significant traffic impacts over there with a large-scale mixed-use development. And I hope that we will see some additional traffic calming measures applied to this street and, if and when that development moves forward. But I'm happy to put this back on consent.
All right, back on consent. All right, moving on, item 4, Commissioner Myers, you asked for this one to be discussed as well.
Yes, and I will, I just want to make a comment, and then I will put it back on consent and use my final comments to speak to all these wonderful items on consent. But I just really thought it was important again here, because we are having such discussion in the community about violent gun crime and community violence, and the lack or need for more support of our police officers. So one thing I wanted to do is thank the police department for moving forward and reaching out for this grant from the state that's going to do 2 things. And one, if we get it in January, it would allow for the police department to hire more employees with to give them, as I see it, a recruitment incentive. And I thought this was really interesting. It's not only it's an incentive for those being hired in 3 different phases, but also an incentive to all personnel who successfully recruit new police and communications officers. I do have a question about that. Perhaps Manager Blaine Williams can answer that. Is that all personnel throughout the county or just in the police department?
Just the police department.
Okay. And then the second part of it really is just what I wanted to see happen when we, for the police cadet program, is that it would enhance the police cadet program using some of the state funds that are available and building on what we funded in in this year's budget. So I'm really pleased to see that, and I think this will help the police department and some of the outreach into the community as well.
All right, back on consent?
Yep.
Back on consent. All right, item 5 is the 2022 Housing and Urban Development Continuum of Care Homeless Assistance Grant approval. Commissioner Denson.
Yeah, thank you. So I do have some questions on this. A few of us were on a trip to Tuscaloosa with a bunch of community leaders, and we had a good talk about the ACC Homeless Coalition, some of the and I appreciate all the work that all the folks who are serving on that are doing, but that the entity was not maybe fleshed out and existing and working to the level of what we saw at other COCs, continuum of care entities, and other places, including Birmingham, and saw a lot of need for improvement there. And so my main question here is on the projects, the 8 projects that are listed here. I see that there is a one of the things is a COC planning grant. And at first I was excited thinking that this funding could be used towards some of the things we discussed about trying to possibly explore new ways for our continuum of care to be restructured so that it's more effective and more working with the community. But then when I looked into it, it looks like that funding, if we were to receive it, the planning grant, is actually just going to go towards grant administration expenses. Is that correct? I guess I wonder if there's any way for us to be able to peel off some of this money so that we could actually use it towards, a bit of a planning grant to be able to help bolster our COC and be able to get to the higher level of efficiency and effectiveness that we want to see.
If I can, I'd like to talk to Director Saunders, ACD Director Saunders, and I'm sure it's a case of, I don't know how much that was counted on in the budget. So the answer is, if it was counted on, just be supplanted with general funds if we, end up needing to spend the whole budget throughout the year, and then putting that back in the mix, as you suggested. So if I can ask Director Saunders, we'll provide a follow-up report on that.
Okay, I appreciate that. Thank you.
Commissioner Houle.
Is it within the purview of the Cloudburst strategic plan that Cloudburst is working on that we approved last month to kind of look at the structure of our coalition, our COC, and how that might be altered? Because, another thing I'm thinking is maybe rather than trying to pick apart this fairly small bucket of funds, we have this strategic planning work that's going to be done in the coming months by professionals who are going to be talking to all these folks that we want to have at the table while we try to bring more folks to the table, and maybe that's the avenue for restructuring as well as a different bucket of money to look at with more time.
So you're correct, Commissioner Houle. The Cloudburst scope is to look at roles and responsibilities throughout our community. One of those roles and responsibilities is the COC. I think the COC is going through an evolution right now, adding membership, a little more diverse, opposed to just service providers. But I suspect some of that will be some recommendations from the strategic plan.
Yeah, I don't want to steamroll your questions, Commissioner Denson. I look forward to hearing what we get back from staff, but I would hesitate to maybe shake things up too much via this avenue when we maybe have that other avenue to go through.
No, definitely, I agree. And if I can say one more thing I meant to ask is, can we also have the most updated continuum of care plan attached to this and maybe sent out to us?
Certainly.
Okay, thank you.
Keep
it off consent.
Keep it off consent. Okay. All right, moving on to item 6. Commissioner Myers, this is the Improving Neighborhood Outcomes in Disproportionately Impacted Communities program, another grant opportunity through the federal government.
Yeah, I think I'm at number 7.
You wanted to,
Yeah, I don't have anything at 6.
nothing with 6, but you wanted to discuss 7?
Yeah, I just
All
wanted to
right,
ask.
so 7 is our FY 21 to 23 Home Investment Partnership Program recommendations.
Yeah, I just wanted to make sure I understood this. This is for there's a place in here that said that we have put the RFP out for the ARPA funding, and that we will be getting recommendations on that. That was $20 million in requests for that $5 million, and that we should be getting requests for that in mid-December. This money, though, is the home funding money, correct? And so I guess it's a mention, was this RFP that went out on this in August, I think it was in the history? Was that just for this, the land trust funding, or was that the only, submission on that? That was a little confusing. And does that mean that we still have this other $1,889,956 available in that future home funding?
So what their land trust is a CHOTO, and they're the only CHOTO that we have in our community.
Okay.
So there's 15% set aside for CHOTOs.
Okay.
That's how they were able to access this funding. And yes, there's $1 million left. Talking to Andrew Saunders today, he wanted me to let everyone understand that, yes, that funding is available, but we suspect that there will be some projects emerging in the near future that we will try to utilize that funding for.
Okay, so that isn't necessarily money that's available for that $20 million. It could, but it's not necessarily.
It certainly could. We just think that there's a lot more projects than there is funding. We certainly think that this $1 million of home funds could be utilized in that manner.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Link.
Yeah, I just want to praise this project. This will provide 8 homes in East Athens, 8 perpetually affordable homes in East Athens. It's an area where there's a huge amount of gentrification and displacement going on, and here we can help to offer 8 families permanent homes in that community. And it's right off the Firefly Trail, so it will assure that people of multiple income levels can have access to that community benefit.
Everybody okay with this back on consent? All right, make a note.
Mayor, quick point of
Yes,
clarification. There are
please.
3 homes associated with this grant.
Yeah, 3, but the
That's right.
overall project is 8 homes, so this funding will go towards 3 of them.
Yes, ma'am.
All right, so moving on to old business. This is the request that we received last month to increase the vehicle fleet for the sheriff's office. Input on this item? Commissioner Denson?
Thank you, Mayor. And I do appreciate Sheriff Williams reaching out and contacting us and explaining some of the situation around this. One thing that I felt was not addressed that I had a concern on is, and so to staff and I guess also to the sheriff's office, if we can get this clarification. I believe that some of this funding we're talking about is with forfeiture funds. And I have pretty strong concerns I've brought up before in the past around funds that are done through civil forfeitures. Because here in Georgia, you don't have to be convicted of a crime for the money to be forfeited and taken from you. We're one of many states that does not have that requirement to actually be guilty. And so I definitely have concerns around us using forfeiture funds. So if I can find clarification on the forfeiture funds that we're using. And also, I guess, on this, I know some communities and some counties, with their police departments, their sheriff's office, they require an annual write-up of all forfeiture funds, how much was taken, what situations. And I would like to know if Athens-Clarke County, if we require that of our agencies, and if we do, I would love to see those spreadsheets. That's all I have.
Other input? All right, moving on to 9. This is acceptance of the Planning Department Special Projects Work Program. I know there's a little bit of dialogue about this in preparation for this. I don't know, Commissioner Denson, if you want to speak to that.
Yes, thank you, Mayor, and I greatly appreciate the time of Assistant Manager Williams and Planning Director Brad Griffin that we're able to talk a little bit and find a way for us to be moving forward with accessory dwelling units, and hoping that we'll have that coming forward pretty soon, in the next couple of months, depending on the Planning Commission moving that forward. So I think we have found a great middle ground, I think, that we get to operate on, and I definitely appreciate staff working and finding a way, so.
Commissioner Link?
Yeah, I'd like to hear some more from staff about, I mean, not now, but you can send me any email, about the plan to move forward with enabling that ADU ordinance to move forward as soon as possible. We had a GovOps meeting, Government Operations Committee meeting yesterday, and we're discussing short-term rental unit regulations, Airbnbs, and there is a potential for some of these Airbnbs to convert to actual housing if we approve an ADU ordinance. And, we all know about our housing crisis and our shortage of affordable housing and modest and missing middle housing, which, we need to find every nook and cranny where we can create that and create housing in our community.
Commissioner Houle?
Thanks. Yeah, I noted that the Gantt chart here, as far as I can tell, appears the same as it did in the last meeting, and I just wanted to clarify, is staff going to be working on a modified version to bring back, or do we need to, as that's what that is?
We didn't want to change it.
Uh-huh.
We didn't want to make it look like, we're switching it up, but we do have an updated work plan right here. I'm happy to speak to it if necessary, but we do have an updated work plan here, which shows ADUs now, missing middle starting in '23. Okay. Short-term rentals were also supposed to start a year from now, but we're working on that right now.
So it's moving up missing middle generally by a year and a portion with the ADUs immediately?
Correct. Text change ADUs immediately.
So to be clear, so if a CDO was to be prompted, we modeled this, but the recommendation stands as it was in the initial agenda item, but if y'all want to modify it, at the end of the day, the commission owns, what priorities are where. That was the whole point of the exercise. Is that fair?
No, that'd be great. And what might be helpful is, for my old eyes, a physical copy of that, and maybe if you get that to everybody through the clerk, that'd be great. It's hard on the PDF to look at the entire span of the Gantt chart. We've got Commissioner Wright, then Commissioner Hamby.
I guess for those of you, I kind of like the way you said, there's a middle ground for the missing middle. But so is the part that you learned with meeting with Manager Williams and staff more timeline-based from what as far as this moving forward, when we vote on it, I guess I'm interested in learning more, whether we talk about it tonight or you and I chat, but because one of the important parts of what I like, what's in the agenda item, is talking about the public hearing process. And that's a long and extensive thing, and I guess if we're changing some of the timelines, I don't know that I want to support moving something faster that's missing the comprehensive public input that I felt was in what was outlined. Can somebody help me with that? Maybe that's part of what you're talking about.
Assistant Manager Jones or Manager Williams, if you could kind of speak to the role of the comprehensive plan update, which obviously undergirds so many of these, and the public input piece.
Well, no, I get what's in the agenda. I'm just trying to find out what's changed since the last time we talked about it. If it's, like you said, the middle ground on this, is it timeline shift, and is it diminishing what I feel is the important part is the public input?
So initially, as we were working through this, we were working through the ADUs in the inclusionary zoning group. And what we were seeing is a pretty elaborate ordinance around ADUs. Staff recognized that we have something already in the ordinance that needed a literally two-word tweak in order to accomplish the same thing. So, I think the middle ground that Commissioner Denson is speaking about, and I'll let you speak to it, is instead of going through this elaborate process of changing the ordinance, which we thought would require a lot of public input, we were literally changing a couple words, and something's already in the ordinance that allows this basically. And speaking to the ADUs, we have a guest house in the ordinance. The only difference is that it doesn't allow a kitchen. So if we just add the word kitchen, allow it, that's an ADU. What was happening is that an ordinance was being drafted in the inclusionary zoning group that was pretty elaborate, that staff really thought that, wow, this is a change from what's already there.
Right.
So we thought that needed public comment. So that's the major difference.
Right. And because my understanding was changing what is somebody all of a sudden having another neighbor on one single-family property by an accessory dwelling becoming an outbuilding becoming an accessory dwelling. That's a pretty big shift from what we're used to as far as the complaints we get about visitors and, the changes that can happen in a single-family neighborhood with people in sheds versus a shed that was tools, because now you can put a kitchen in it.
Well, there's certainly impacts to the text amendment.
Yeah.
So Commissioner Denson, spoke with Assistant Manager Jones and Griffin to see if there was a way to try and move forward some of the work the committee's been working on. And so that was seen as a way to move that piece forward, but we still stand behind the fact, the comp plan and missing middle are things that need to happen as we better understand our future land use map. I think there was, and understandably, some surprise that missing middle conversation shifted 2 years out. And then we still stand by that there needs to be, staff would recommend that there be a public process, because as we've said before, there is a potential for controversy as you increase density in certain neighborhoods. And So we still think that's possible, but staff, within the plan and at the request of Commissioner Denson, found a way to kind of move the missing middle discussion up to FY23, is that correct? That's correct. So those are the significant changes in this, if I'm correct, Assistant Manager Jones.
Short-term rentals now as well.
Okay, and so then that will be coming as a commission-defined option, or your work with Commissioner Denson, which is coming from your gig and in your inclusionary zoning representation too.
I haven't been in the meetings, but I was trying to take share. I think the former, from speaking with her at staff meeting on Monday, there'll have to be a text amendment to the zoning ordinance that is going to, would be to, and I think it has to go through Planning Commission first. But I think it would allow ADUs as a matter of right in certain districts.
But I think Commissioner Wright's question is about this agenda item,
yeah.
and this agenda item
Yeah,
would feature a commission-defined option that would be submitted by a commissioner.
And I'm, we didn't discuss this, but my preference would be that it's a commission-defined option, because we presented this, and it is a confusing work plan with lots of
We're talking about the
details.
schedule right now.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
So not having multiple ones going around, and because one commissioner was asking about it, and staff, like anybody, if there's a change that a commissioner wants to see, will explain how you can get there. So I would recommend that this be a CDO to change the recommendation.
Okay, because as y'all remember how much public input we got on the chicken ordinance and people being concerned about chickens and how close they were and how just, my backyard or your backyard activity is changing. And this is obviously much, much bigger than that, but I think I want to just be mindful of what's being changed with this and not skipping any points with it, because I understand that we give permits out now for accessory dwellings as it is, and it's just missing that big oven, three-pronged, as we say, apparatus in it. But again, there's outbuildings existing that would be modified and be a totally different backyard against somebody else's backyard, as well as the existing ones.
And the substance of that discussion, obviously, we'd have after a planning commission recommendation.
Gotcha. And this isn't usurping it, what is
Correct.
coming forward.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, we still follow the text amendment process as we normally do. But if it's helpful, Commissioner Wright, in the follow-up report for tonight, we'll try and provide a narrative on what the changes that are being proposed mean as far as things moving around the schedule to try and be clear. And if anyone still doesn't understand after that, then we're glad to answer any questions. Try to
Right,
explain
because it sounds like, there's things happening in the Government Ops Committee, inclusionary zoning, and this, and we're all, if they're not coming in sync, if it's just a matter of explaining how they're going to become synchronized, I welcome learning that.
And we'll show that in the Gantt chart as well. And, Director Griffin's just texted me, and he just let me know that, the missing middle scan may be in '24. As long as the land use plan and the growth concept plan are done, we can start working on the missing middle. It really, it all hinges on the comprehensive plan, the growth
Right.
concept map, and the future land use plan map.
Yeah, because I do believe that is extremely important with these to be happening appropriately, all there. And then, and by not being on GOC as well as, you're on both. So you've got that, you're set, as we say, immersed in those topics. So if we can get that summarized in the follow-up, that'd be great.
Certainly will.
Commissioner Hamby.
Sure, thank you. And I just want to make a little correction about our government ops meeting last night and discussing short-term rental. There's about 1,092 short-term rentals, and there was a comment made that perhaps some of those would move over to long-term rentals, but the 1,092, as we learned from our attorney's office, are grandfathered in as short-term rentals. So whatever action we take on short-term rentals, which I hope we're going to be taking some action, may not have quite the impact on that as we were hoping. But ADUs possibly could, because that's a new element that's moving into something that a homeowner could create a short-term rental out of an ADU. And as Manager Williams says, we do allow, I need to learn more about ADUs, but I know we allow them now. I think we got 75 permits per year coming forward that just don't have the big oven and the big kitchen. You know, if you're like me, you don't use your big oven and I don't even know how to turn the daggum thing on, but I know how to work a microwave. The other thing about, and I know we'll have the discussion on ADUs because I see where it's on the Planning Commission agenda for next month, and I won't take too much time with this, but one of the things to also be on the lookout for with ADUs, which I think the kitchen's fine, is within historic districts, because within historic districts, ADUs are non-conforming as it stands right now. So there are several ADUs that do have kitchens that are non-conforming and several that don't have kitchens that are also non-conforming. So in historic districts, they're not able to take advantage of the property tax freeze that their neighbors perhaps are able to take advantage of. So as you're looking at that ordinance, it might be mindful to address that as well.
Commissioner Link, Denson Houle.
I just want to point out that right now, as our code stands, it's not necessarily legal to have an ADU if the occupants of that ADU exceed the no more than 2 unrelated clause in our single-family zones. Technically, it's not. By a text amendment, we could allow that, and, there might be certain conditions that apply to allow that. It's my hope that, some of these Airbnb operators would choose to convert their Airbnb to an ADU, because right now it is legal to have a fully operational accessory unit that is an Airbnb, and you could put, 4 or 5 people in there whenever as an Airbnb, but to have an ADU with 2 unrelated people would not be. So I do hope that we'll see more kind of long-term rental and actual housing for actual working Athenians created out of something like this.
And again, we'll have that substantive discussion as a planning and zoning item recommendation in the next couple of months. So Commissioner Denson.
Thank you, Mayor. And yeah, not to go into it too much, but just to try to spell out a little bit more, I think, what I'm hoping the CDO and what the Inclusionary Housing Task Force is talking about doing is still pursuing in the long term this more fleshed out ADU ordinance that I think would address some of the concerns that Commissioner Hamby brings up and stuff like that, that can help direct that to be more affordable housing. But that we recognize that whole more comprehensive take on it is going to need to wait till we can kind of finish up. But in the meantime, the planning staff recognizing that there was, an easier way to go about the text amendment in the short term to be able to allow ADUs to move forward in a manner that synchronizes with the short-term rentals, because a lot of that stuff does need to get synchronized there a bit. And so, I really appreciate staff kind of thinking in a forward ways that we can move forward, but also do the comprehensive work that we need to do in the long term. So I look forward to us. I'll bring that CDO forward, and I look forward in the coming months for us to have more discussion around that text amendment.
Commissioner Houle.
Thanks. Yeah, I think, seeing the modified version will be really helpful, and I look forward to the CDO also. It seems to me like there's kind of 2 things going on here. One is that there's an order that staff recommends things happen in. We got to do this before this. And I have some questions there around like why we can't just do certain things in tandem. For example, why does the future land use map need to be completed to define where all the residential places will be before we can discuss what happens in those residential places? To me, it seems like those things, in some cases at least, could happen at the same time. And then the other issue seems to be around staff capacity. And I think, maybe part of the like time shock I and others had, seeing how much stuff got bumped back, was, at least from my perspective, having budgeted for more HCD staff and a new planning position, if that was going to help build our capacity to get some of this work done sooner. And so if that's, insofar as part of why this is being dragged out is a staff capacity issue, I would also encourage staff to think about proposals for an additional position or positions that could help us achieve getting this work done sooner. Because I would hate to see us drag out things that are extremely relevant to a very big problem this community is facing around housing, just because we don't have enough people to do the work. So that's all.
We were fortunate to have another position put in the budget this year for planning. Right now, the challenge is just finding planners. Like, the market is hot for planners right now, engineers for right now, because they're all going to the private sector. Luckily, I feel like we're going to emerge from this better off because we've got some really good fish on the hook, if you will. But staffing is part of the challenge, yes.
All right.
Reel them in.
We're going to move on to new business. Item 10 is the Athens Area Homeless Shelter Services Contract Approval. Obviously, it's a kind of recurrent item that we've seen before. Any input on this item?
Yeah, move it to consent.
Commissioner Houle?
Very happy with it going on consent. I was just wondering if staff knew or if staff could inquire and relay to us any information we have or they have regarding the wages or wage floor at the Athens Area Homeless Shelter, especially if it's changed since this.
I have no idea.
Okay.
That
Could
wasn't,
staff inquire about that and relay it? But I'm happy with this going on consent. It's just, I think many of us thought that this in part might help with that a bit. So.
and the question exactly was, what is the wage floor for the folks who are working at the Athens Homeless Shelter?
Yes.
All right, other than that, everybody okay with consent? All right, we'll get some feedback from staff. All right, item 11 is the Oconee River Greenway Network Connector Project and Public Art Element, which is, of course, a designated part of every public-facing SPLOST project. Questions? Commissioner Wright?
I just want to say it was very exciting to be involved in the reviewing and voting with the team. I really appreciate those who stepped forward and helped judge the art, which is a really fun thing to do. And this is going to be really neat, that huge bare retaining wall of the section of the Greenway that's right behind Oconee Street's Waffle House. So it's going to be viewed mostly from people coming and going from that exit entrance ramp, right? So there's both of those ramps there. The people on the trail are going to be basically walking on top of this repeated floral arrangement. We had hoped that the yellow flower could maybe be daffodils. We'll see how that goes. But I'm happy for this to be on consent for this District 4 section of the public art for the Greenway.
Nice. Commissioner Link?
Yeah, I'm just, as a kind of nitpicky plant nerd, I know the explanation of the art talks about the camellia and other Georgia native plants, which I do not believe there is a native camellia in Georgia. They're used a lot, but they're Asiatic species. And I'm not certain of the species identified on, I don't see that they're identified anywhere, but they kind of look like an Asiatic lily. I just want to make sure that we're not misleading the public by presenting a mural and calling it native plants if they're not. That's my only comment.
Plant origin aside, everybody okay with consent?
Consent, yeah, sure.
All right. Moving on to item 12, this is the Quarter Improvements Project, and this is the proposed project concept, obviously kind of first phase before we even get to design for Mitchell Bridge and Timothy. So, Commissioner Hamby.
Sure, thank you. And I know probably Commissioner Roll has something to say as well. If not, I'm sorry. I don't, it looks like there's something to be determined. I don't know what concept we're voting on. Am I reading that right?
Has the project committee not met?
It's to be determined.
Yeah, I noticed that parenthetically in the, if you look down at the options.
And maybe I'll just make my comments and we can go from there, but I don't want to, I guess, preempt the user group and what they're thinking, but I'm sure they're probably thinking the same thing, that a lot of these projects, both of them, cost a lot of money. And certainly, I know that there's probably some large preference for a multi-use trail, but I'm also want us to be realistic in the fact that would a sidewalk be able to connect quicker and give the folks on Timothy and Mitchell Bridge Road an opportunity to have that connection that's supported in other areas of town from that standpoint. The project as it's laid out here, I think there's about $1 million left in this, and I think they want to do some study with GDOT to look at the corridor. I'm curious about the price of that study. It looks like we're splitting it 50-50 with GDOT. And I know we had some concept plans for that, so I'm not sure what that cost of that study would be. But I will say this, when you take the $1 million plus the roughly $7 million we have laid out for the new SPLOST that just took effect last month in collections, that would generally give us enough money to build that network of sidewalks along Mitchell Bridge Road and Timothy, and hopefully we'll have some success with the grant for the bridge on Mitchell Bridge Road that we've applied for. So just my 2 cents worth. I think we've got to be realistic and work with the dollars that we have and accommodate as many people as we can accommodate with this SPLOST project and this TSPLOST. So just my initial thoughts on that. Thank you.
Other input on this side?
If I could address, Commissioner,
Please.
just a couple. So I think, so what the intersection study and the cost was, and this was from the GDOT commissioner when we had a discussion about it.
Right.
I think it's 500,000.
Wow.
And I think 250 would be our portion of that. And that is, the way, Mayor, that I think he phrased it was the fail alternatives, like trying to look at alternatives and come up with, eliminate some configurations and settle on one. That's the purpose of the study. And we will follow up in a follow-up report to verify that, plus your question about what the concepts are. But generally, they are, as you said, a multi-use path. I think where they're waiting to get some feedback is which alignment to go with. But to your point, they are all expensive when you go with a multi-use path.
Well, they also seem, just knowing the dollars we have, somebody talked about generations before we realize something. I mean, we could realize sidewalks right now that people along Timothy utilize in the small part they have, and it's also on Mitchell Bridge Road. And they would realize it even more so along some other stretches, but I'm just trying to be realistic about it all. Commissioner Holt may have something to add to it. I'm not sure.
Commissioner Houle?
Yeah, I'm largely aligned with Commissioner Hamby on this. I'm thinking we've got, just under $7.5 million between TSPLOST 2023 and what's left designated for seeing this through from 2018. And if I'm recalling the numbers from our work session correctly, that's still less than what we need for just sidewalks, never mind with multi-use for the entirety of everything. So I think the other question I have for staff is if we could get some clarity on how the phasing of this work is going to be prioritized in terms of like what goes where, when. Right now we're in the concept phase. In my mind, part of the concept is also thinking through like kind of what should go down first. I guess I'll refrain from sharing any other specific ideas I have in mind until we get clear feedback from the user group. Again, not to try to preempt the decision making they do and the recommendation we get from them. I think when we're trying to be realistic with the dollars, I think we also need to be realistic about in the time frame, like what's going to go where.
Mayor, maybe I can help it. Sorry, Commissioner Hall, you may not be finished.
Finish, Commissioner.
The only other thing I'd like is maybe if we could get an explanation on where these corridors intersect with planned Greenway infrastructure that we're actually anticipating is going to come through. Like if there is at some point going to be a trail built in the back of a neighborhood or something that's going to intersect with this road that doesn't currently exist, that isn't obvious the way, say, Ben Burton is, then it would also be helpful to have that in mind when we're deciding the phasing of things.
Follow-up, Commissioner Hamby?
Sure. I guess my follow-up is that I would hope as we develop a concept that if we send it out for bid that it would be as a package so that it just seems like we'd get a better price if it's as a package like that for both Mitchell Bridge and Timothy Road. And I think it's in tier, 2025 is when it was tiered for with the SPLOST dollars for that aspect. But I'll also point out too that, of course, Timothy was one of the areas that was highlighted, and Mitchell Bridge as well, in the missing middle study for possibilities. But those possibilities are only going to exist if you have the sidewalks and the amenities for people to be able to walk. There you go. Thank you. Appreciate that. My words aren't coming to me tonight, so I don't know what's going on.
And of course, I know that among the other projects that are approved through voter referendum for future funding, is the connector up Tallahassee Road, so that will connect to this corridor too.
I mean, Mayor, I'm sorry, I keep harping on this, but the possibilities of this connectivity with the rest of Athens is huge. I mean, along Tallahassee Road, yeah, we've got the SPLOST project that's already in the works for TSPLOST for Tallahassee Road. But then there's just small stretches along Oglethorpe that you could do a sidewalk gap program and along Macon Highway and Millage Road there that would connect the west side to the east side in this regard. So I think it's a game changer for how we can walk.
Commissioner Houle.
Yeah, just one other thing is, when we're talking about how to stretch this roughly $7.5 million, part of it is maybe we can use this to leverage grants or partnerships with GDOT. So it'd be also helpful to understand from staff, is there a difference in our ability to get grants if we go with multi-use versus sidewalk? And then also if there are specific stretches that we think are more likely to qualify for grants, especially thinking of that bridge, that really dangerous, very narrow bridge over the loop. But, I don't know what all is out there. I know staff is doing their best to keep their ear to the ground on stuff, and there's, as I understand it, kind of more out there than staff maybe even has the capacity to apply for. But again, when we're thinking about prioritizing where to phase things, if there's places where we're likely to double or triple our money through grants or through partnerships with GDOT, then I'd like to see us prioritizing those places first too. So.
Just one more thing. I'm a bit concerned about the $500,000 price tag for a study that, I don't know. I don't know what the engineering costs are for all that, but that seems a bit high. I mean, we've done studies we're doing a homeless study that's less than that.
I may not remember that figure correctly, but that was from a meeting that we had with GDOT Commissioner Russell McMurray, and that was just an estimate that he put in.
For the intersection.
Yeah. So, but we'll verify that.
All right, we're going to move on to item 13, which is TSPLOST 2018 Project 6. This is the Firefly Trail Subproject 3 right-of-way acquisition eminent domain resolution. This follows up on an earlier one for the segment leading up to this point, approximately to the Spring Valley Trailer Park. Commissioner Hamby? Sure.
Thank you, Mayor. And I guess I just want to say this. The folks that came down and spoke to us tonight, I know Judd will be working with them, and our SPLOST folks will as well. And I know we heard what they had to say, and we're listening, and I do hope that we can help accommodate what it is that they're looking for as far as making sure they're compensated and making sure that their property meets their needs as they are the ones impacted by this. But I would like perhaps Attorney Judd, if you could, just maybe by the next meeting, be able to address the transportation versus recreation issue as far as how we're able to do the eminent domain on this project in that regard. I know you brought it to our attention before and we've discussed it, but it'd be helpful since it got brought up tonight to be able to share that again. Thank you.
Thanks, Commissioner. Commissioner Davenport.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. I would like to take this off will not add this on to consent just to have further discussion. I'm not against the Firefly Trail. I think it's a great asset for the community. It provides a lot of benefits. I know we had a very interesting last March meeting. I still stand with my residents, with my constituents, and with their concerns. I just have a question with the procedure. So it seems that this is new to the residents, that they were somewhat in discussions, or they knew about it was potentially coming, but no one formally made, there haven't been really any meaningful offers or discussions about property acquisition in the past. I just want to clarify that, if that discussion with the residents.
And Commissioner
went in staff.
Davenport, would the model that we've pursued already with the existing trail segment be a helpful illustration? Just to say, hey, here's how we just did a piece of it, and thus here's how the next segment would roll out, given that recency of experience.
Yeah, that would help, but mainly, has anyone been, has staff contacted the residents?
Well, I can speak to that.
Yeah.
Yeah, staff has contacted them, and I think, because they were not getting, some of the residents indicated that they weren't willing, they were asking, has eminent domain been authorized? In other words, I don't think they're, I don't want to say cooperating is the right word, but I think we're at the point where staff feels like they've all done all they can do. There have been properties they've been able to acquire as part of moving the trail forward. And with these, the next step is they feel like they need the authority to be able to use eminent domain in order to be able to move the matter forward. However, even though you get that authorization, they'll again try to address the owner with trying to not have to do that. If that makes sense.
So there will still be continued conversations?
Yeah, I think there'll still continue conversations, yes.
Yes, and
And we had that conversation together with staff. Did I reflect that correctly?
yes, you did. Thank you, Attorney Judd.
Yeah.
And what I would offer to Commissioner Davenport, to answer your question, as you know, there's really two segments here, A and B, and we've been working on A, and this is B that we're talking about, I think, as you get closer to Winterville. And we will, in the follow-up report, detail the interactions that we've had with the residents in both sections, so that, to answer your question.
Yes.
But yes, the conversations don't cease with action on November 1st.
So you guys know where I stand on this, but I look forward to getting staff reports and continued conversations amongst my colleagues and friends.
Commissioner Link?
Yeah, I'd like to speak to the transportation corridor aspect. Right now, the Firefly Trail is a series of disconnected segments, which is not actually pragmatic for transportation because it is disconnected. The whole point of the connected trail is that it will enable that transportation corridor. Right now, you've got a segment going through downtown Winterville that's not really connecting a whole lot and is good for little else other than recreation. But once this segment gets completed and the other segment that brings it closer to town, it will enable people to commute from Winterville into downtown Athens. And I have a dear friend who bought a home on the Firefly Trail in downtown Winterville with the expectation that they will be able to commute into downtown Athens to work at the university every day on their bike. So it may not be serving as a transportation corridor now, but once it's a fully realized connected trail, it will most certainly offer a transportation option to many, many people and get us a step closer to our goals of a cleaner community and a community where all people have access to every part of the community, whether they have access to a car or not.
Commissioner Wright?
I appreciate you guys coming down, reminding us of the compassion and the intimate to your property's path that was approved when there was an alternate that wasn't approved. So I hope that you guys are making the list of those factors to you, your quality of life, your separation of your property, so that when the discussions are made and when staff is speaking, that compassion is there and it's not simply a square footage formula. There's more to the formula than square footage. I understand that. I had eminent domain by the University of Kentucky on my first house, and so it's not an easy thing, but you can stand strong. There were people in Lennon Town that stood stronger than others. Each personality and each person's struggle, pain of it is different. So just be sure you express yourself to us as well as the process moves forward. I'm struggling with supporting this agenda item because of those reasons.
Commissioner Houle.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, I mean, this is a project that we're well into and we need to see through. So I'd be especially interested in colleagues' suggestions on what kinds of things y'all would like to see that would make this better in your mind to see through. I mean, we've got to go somewhere, some way, somehow. I know we had some folks speak tonight with their concerns and even enumerated some, I don't know if I'd call them conditions, but certainly expectations of how to go about this in a respectful manner. And so perhaps, my general understanding of staff and the people we contract with is that they already tend to do that, but for whatever reasons, I think some people here maybe don't feel like that's been done to date. And so maybe there's a way that we can be crystal clear on what our expectation as a commission is of the kind of work that will be done, and maybe that can get us in a better place with everyone. Make a kind of sour thing a bit sweeter. The other thing I just want to caution against is, I'm glad that we're talking about Lindentown a lot, but I really regret when I hear people compare countless things to Lindentown. There's a very big difference between the displacement and trauma endured by people displaced in Lindentown and similar neighborhoods to this. And that's not to belittle this. I understand this has been very frustrating, and there's been a lot of, I think, well-founded concern from residents who are directly affected by this or who live nearby. But being forcibly removed from your home and not paid anything from it and having it taken away from you, and all of the other context and the reality of the times and the way race played into it, I think it's just very different than what we're talking about here. And I really hope that we can stop comparing those two, because I think it really belittles the reality of that situation when that occurs.
And just to really follow up on kind of a couple of the comments and thinking of some of those specifics, and I think Commissioner Wright identified a healthy and good activity for residents as being sort of an inventory of those pieces that would be ideally situated. And those might be things like fencing and screening and plantings and similar elements. And, on the staff side, fortunately, when you think about sidewalk or bikeways or park spaces or roadways, there are so many recent examples of public infrastructure having gone in where there were graceful neighborly engagements. I think of the corner of Millage Avenue as being an illustration of that, where there was a long need for a safety improvement so that kids could get successfully to Clarke Central High School, and a couple of years into its existence, it's like it's been there all the time. So anyhow, I hope staff has those illustrations in the same way that I hope residents have that inventory of aspects that they would like to see. So, Commissioner Myers.
Yeah, I reiterate that and understand, as a homeowner myself, that I want to protect my home, and that's very special and has a lot of emotional meaning to me. And I would hope that it followed that advice or urgings that have been there to make it clear to us and others, in terms of screening, privacy, vegetation, and so forth, because my understanding was that was one of the reassurance I felt I had been given, that our staff would be working with people individually. So I would also ask that the manager sort of fill us in and give us some background information on that from staff side, so that we can have this and work. Communication is an incredibly difficult process, so I hope we can do that. And I also will reiterate the need for the redefinition, the re-explanation of the eminent domain and the points that were brought up by transportation. And also, if, in terms of transportation, how that is measured, at what point is it measured? I know I'm on the Greenway a lot, and I'm on the Firefly Trail a lot. There are a lot of people using that recreationally. I know I specifically am using it most of the time to get from the east side over across Waffle House down here to this meeting, for example. So I know I am using it for transportation, but where does that line, where does that cross? And I don't even know what the legal requirements are or not on that. So I will look to the attorney on that. I do want to reiterate, that we have been working on this for so long. I may have missed something, but I pulled up our SPLOST and TSPLOST, and I hate looking at this number, but what I came up with was $34 million so far, and I may have missed something that we have put as a community towards this rail to trail, starting with the 2011 SPLOST, the 2000, and then many others, the 2 TSPLOST programs as well. And so I'm looking forward to finishing up this project, and hopefully we can do it in a respectful, caring way with the landowners as well. I did want to ask Manager Williams, in terms of the eminent domain or even the need for the land, could you clarify for me again what is actually needed? It's a rail bed plus how much, and is some of that's temporary for use during construction? How does that work again?
Yes, and I do need to verify that. I would tell you that the rail bed is most likely going to be the permanent easement, and then there may be some temporary construction easements on the periphery, depending on where the location is for access and just, being able to build it out. But I'll clarify the actual width of that. And you'd asked me another question too, and Commissioner Thornton had raised some concerns the last time that we were together about having a vote on this for any properties that were in District 2 when somebody wasn't there to represent District 2. And this will also be in our follow-up report, but staff's developed a map. And as it turns out, again, there were 2 packages here, if you will. The first one that's closer to town was already approved, and we're moving through that process. And then there's a second section that's in question now. In the second section, my understanding is there's no properties in District 2, and we'll have a map that shows you that. So the properties that are in District 2 were voted on already by the commission when there was a sitting District 2 commissioner.
Yeah, and I in response there, just in understanding that, I do respect and I do feel that that's a real invasion of homes. It's a lot of change going on. But like Commissioner Houle, I do regret the comparison to Town, only in that the people there are lost their whole homes completely, and what we're talking about here is something else, and it's serious for those people who are there, but it is something different. But I look forward to that further information.
Commissioner Myers, you indicated you were looking for some information from the attorney's office?
Right, I think it's the same thing that.
Oh, the same thing, okay.
The same thing.
Definition
And
of
then
eminent
if-
domain for a variety of
If the
purposes.
transportation is included in that, if
Yeah,
that's a
okay, I'm with you.
component, at what point does it become transportation?
Yeah, I'll do that. I just want to make sure
Okay.
I understood. Same thing Commissioner
Commissioner
Henry was
Lake.
asking.
It might be helpful to the public and just for the public record to include some of the early history of the Firefly Trail in this history, and the fact that, the overall Firefly Trail is a project that was envisioned decades ago. This isn't just something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we still have a couple of options on the table. One of the recommended option was to build a new half Judicial Center where some of the programming would be separated, but this is pretty much just continuing the process of site selection. So we still have some issues to hash out.
Yes, so you see, and I barely had a chance to look at it, but you'll see in the agenda report that there is criteria for the selection, and there's a map included as part of that. And so this basically is the filter through which the site selection group will do the next phase of work.
Yeah.
And there'll be a vote on that back to us at some point.
That's right. And they'll return to us with some options. All right.
I mean, I'd like this to stay off.
Okay.
That's a huge project, so just, thanks.
All right, sounds good. All right, item 17 is comparably the Eastside Library project, proposed project concept and proposed site selection criteria. So again, sort of a list of desired elements that are kind of the marching orders for the site selection group. And they will use those again, similarly to return to us with site prospects.
On this, I'm, you know, I guess I'll listen to what my colleagues have to say too about putting this on consent. We've done a very thorough job, I think, of reaching out. There's a lot of public input. I guess the only thing I would say is I haven't had time to totally digest all the public input, so perhaps for that reason, I'd like to leave it off consent.
Absolutely.
But we really have, I've been very impressed with also the way the SPLOST program management and the people who are working on this have used some of the input to change some of the criteria slightly. And in fact, I don't know if it's in here, but in terms of using the public input, the area, if you go down to the map of the area, has changed and expanded to go into more of the East Athens neighborhood up to Peter Street, so that, you know, it's both a good example of public input changing exactly what we're doing to what was brought up during the concerns and the needs of the community. So I really appreciate that. But let's leave it off consent so we can have more time to review all this.
Commissioner Houle?
Yeah, I just wanted to note also that we received from the clerk just before we did our little walk audit of Prince Ave, a couple of attachments for this that are like pretty dense. And I wanted to request for myself, at least, similar to Mayor Gertz's request for the planning work plan, attachment number 2, which has these really big tables. It would be helpful to have a printout of those too, just to kind of make sense of it. Thanks.
All right, we're going to move on to item 18, and this is just professional design services for SPLOST 2020 Project 28, which is the mental health recovery facility project that we're doing in conjunction with the state-designated regional mental health provider, Advanced Behavioral Health Services.
Consent.
Consent.
All right, item 18 on consent, Ms. Jean. All right. 19 is project management and staff augmentation services for TSPLOST 2022/2023. I think we've just begun collecting those pennies. And much like we did with the last SPLOST package, the 2020 package, we went out to the professional services community and we requested proposals for these services. And after a deliberative process that involved myself, a couple commissioners, staff members, and a couple of professional members of the public, the recommendation is to designate Jacobs for these services.
I have a question.
Yeah.
I don't mind consent.
Go right ahead.
So will you be putting together a oversight committee for this TSPLOST? Like we did the
Good question. Yeah, so the committee was comprised of some members of the sort of formation committee, and I could not tell you sitting here as we are speaking if we've already made a request of residents.
I think normally in the past, you and previous SPLOST things would ask for one name from each commissioner.
I think that's right. And given the recency of the SPLOST, I think I'm remembering that. And so, yes, we'll be following up with that request.
Okay.
So yes, there will absolutely be an oversight committee. And then I'll find out where that process is and we'll push it forward.
Okay.
With the mayor.
Okay. Commissioner Houle.
Yeah, I'm curious about the staff augmentation services that are referenced in here. This is a new term for me, and it says it comes with costs to be determined. And it sounds like maybe that came from a recommendation from you, Attorney Drake. So I don't know if you can maybe shed some light on kind of what that is and why you feel we need it. And then also, you know, how we'd go about the to be determined cost.
Sure.
that would be factored in there.
And that's a good question, Commissioner Rule, because I noticed at the end of the purchasing orders, a lot of times we'll see augmentation costs for Jacobs that have spent, so I'm curious about that as well.
So that is a result of, we went through this the last time that we bid this out for SPLOST 2020. And we bid it out with staff augmentation. The proposals came back with staff augmentation quoted. But when we went through the contracting process, it wasn't specifically named. Then came the project with the food bank. And so this, if you'll remember a few years ago, the commission said, well, how can we move projects forward more quicker? And we said, well, the points of intersection are the work itself, procuring things and design services, checking in with the public, checking in with the commission. And so trying to procure quicker was what everybody wanted to do, and so we have on-call contracts. So in this case, with the food bank, when we went to, get a scope of work from Jacobs to be a project representative on that owner's rep, after the attorneys looked at it, they said, well, that wasn't in the contract. So we had to stop and go and procure that, and then bring somebody in. With the Athens Neighborhood Health Center, same thing. But in that case, when we added that action to the Athens Neighborhood Health Center approval, that y'all would approve staff augmentation for and use Jacobs for that. So what this does, y'all, is when things come up and we need some extra assistance to help backstop staff, a great, for instance, is we are asking Jacobs to help us with a grants committee y'all been asking about. With all this federal money around, it's hard for individual departments to figure out what's what, and so they are preparing a scope of services where they would help work with our staff to identify grant opportunities that we could target and go after that are congruent with what y'all are looking to. So that's what we mean by staff augmentation, and it's sort of like an on-call contract where we've already done the procurement through this contract and we can move quickly to bring people on when we need them to scale up and down.
Is that helpful?
It is, yeah. I guess I'm still curious, maybe I'm just needing to digest it a little bit, but I'm thinking about the,
Question, I heard you make, if this language is not in there about giving them the ability to provide staff augmentation, then they can't do that. Does that make sense,
Mm-hmm.
So I was asked a question, I said, do I think that needs to be in there? I said, well, if you want to be able to provide staff augmentation for things other than TSPLOST projects, it needs to be in there. So I'm not espousing that as a policy. That's a decision for you to make. I mean, I'm saying, though, from a legal perspective, as Manager Williams was saying, a contractor like Jacobs is only authorized to perform the work that is approved under the contract.
I think that maybe where I'm stuck still feeling a bit odd about this is where it says that with costs to be determined, where does that, how much room does that leave for more money to go toward administrative overhead essentially to see this through? Because after the fact, we're hit with this, request from Jacobs to augment their staff.
So this is no different than an on-call contract.
Mm-hmm.
So when an on-call for public utilities, they have several engineering firms that you approve in advance. So when staff needs something, they go to the engineering firms and they give them the scope of services, and then those ones on call, we don't do an RFP. We've already got a universe. They send back their approaches and responses, and then staff selects one of them. And if it's within, if they're going to be paid out of a budget y'all have already approved on a project you've already approved, then we don't have to go through all that procurement. We kind of go straight to go. We can't tell you what the costs are because we don't know what we're asking them to do yet. But when something comes up and we need it and they provide it and there's budgeted funds for it, then we're able to get a task order from a previously approved contracted group, and they do it. That's how we move forward. So I'll just say, if the commission asks us to deliver projects very quickly, and we're glad to do it. If you don't want to approve the staff augmentation, that's fine, but we'll just have to go through an extra step at some point in the future.
A couple of new folks, and then I'll follow up with Commissioner
So
Hamby.
getting-
Commissioner Myers?
This augmentation, Manager Williams, they would only be used for budget items that have already been approved. If there was something else that was new, we would have to approve that, or is that the case? Or could it be used for something if there was like 50,000 for some smaller project?
Well, so the two cases in point that we've used, so we've used we've used an outside group to help us with our paving program, for instance. So that's where, so at one point we had, a paving inspector, and then when we had all the new paving come in, one inspector couldn't cover it. So rather than hire another person, we had staff augmented by an inspector from the group, which we don't have to pay their full-time salary and benefits. We just bill them as needed. The Neighborhood Health Center is another example of where we've used staff augmentation that the mayor and commission approved. The food bank would have been another example of where we would use that. It's not something we would use often, but it's great to have that tool if we need it to quickly respond. But it's up to the commission, as Attorney Drake said, obviously. If y'all don't want to pursue that, we don't have to.
Commissioner Wright?
Yeah, I was on the committee with Mayor Gertz for this, and I'm not sure if this is going to help understand it, but in my mind, when you've got the team that it was presented, the different companies presented the teams that they have to work on our projects. We've known, and with Jacobs, you guys know a good bit of these people from our community. And in my mind, it's if you work in a production office, or like when I worked at the vet school, and I had to draw, and I'm working on a project, I had to, every hour of my day is assigned to a project. And some days it's one project and one it's another. And so in my mind, this is allowing some of the team to be multitasking. I think it's helping solve the problem that planning department has by lack of staff. You see what I mean? They're multitasking the people as needed for a project. Is that describing it as well?
Yes.
With it. So, I mean, I wish we had a team for augmenting staff services in our planning department. You see what I mean? But these companies have depth in their staffing. Private, that might be competitive, but it's allowing us to keep our projects moving forward if they can jump from one project to another. Is how I think that this is allowing that to happen without it surfacing back up within their pool.
This process will follow our own calls that we've been doing for several years now. So there'd be an identified person that was procured in the appropriate manner, and when things came up, we would get a task order, and if we had the money for it, we would move forward with it to keep the project going.
So it's almost like we're adding another on-call group in a way. Commissioner Edwards?
Yeah, I mean, to me, this seems like a routine aspect of the way this government has been run for years now. We're giving the management staff here the discretion to contract as needed with the selected TSPLOST administrative company to implement these projects.
Yeah.
Commissioner Hamby?
Well, I guess I'm not going to hold it up, but I do remain concerned that when we see these on the purchasing orders listed as Jacobs augmentation, sometimes I don't know what they're for, and we don't vote on what they're for. And I do, I mean, in the procurement process, if you're Jacobs or whoever else may have applied for this RFP or responded to this RFP, did they know that augmentation would be a part? Because it's a good way for them to earn extra money beyond what the contract is saying.
Right.
So, and I don't know, just a few.
Would it be helpful in the grid that we get at the voting meeting to have, maybe another column that has just the slightest bit of narrative around which project this procurement regarded?
Well, I guess I'm wondering, does it make more sense if you're going to have augmentation services like this to have somebody besides besides the Jacobs do the augmentation services or not. I don't know the answer to that. But I'm also wondering about the procurement process, because if I knew I had a chance to make some augmentation money on other projects, I may have bidded differently. You know, I may have bidded less knowing that there's going to be a possibility for me to make extra money on some project that may come up. So I'd be curious over the last, 5 years, how much Jacobs has earned in augmentation dollars.
They've earned zero because
And
we haven't done
augmentation.
anything with them. I mean, other than the paving.
When I see it on the purchasing order, so those are things.
Yeah, all of those, with the exception of paving and the neighborhood health center, which y'all did approve, there has been no staff augmentation because the attorney, did not feel like it was in the last contract that we signed, so we've not exercised that. So they have not, anything that you see, Commissioner Hamby, on the financial report is billing for their SPLOST, TSPLOST services.
Okay. I sometimes see the word augmentation, so that raised a red flag for me.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, we have not, I'll go back and look at those and clarify that. I could be mistaken.
And I could be too, so I don't want to mischaracterize anything, so.
But there's, and I appreciate what you're saying and concern about that. And certainly if this does go forward, we can make an effort to notify y'all of when there's such an engagement and what type of process it's under. But I understand the concern.
Commissioner Houle.
Just to put a finer point on it, whatever those costs ends up being that are to be determined, are those paid using TSPLOST dollars or are those paid using other funds?
Well, the way I remember it is that, for instance, the neighborhood health center was not a SPLOST project. And so we were wanting to use project augmentation and that's what y'all approved, that it was not with SPLOST dollars. And that was a bit unusual too, both that and the food bank. We're building a lot of buildings for other people, and the government's at risk. And so we needed a design construction professional owner's representative, and so that's what we've employed with those two projects. And other than the grants example I gave and the paving example I gave, we don't have any ready projects that we're wanting to jump into for staff augmentation. It's just a tool that's available for some flexibility if the need arises.
Okay.
All right, 20 is one of two items by title only. Given our experience with the summer 2022 youth programming and the rapid movement from issuance of the opportunity to programming initiation date, I wanted to make sure that we were teeing things up successfully for summer 2023, in part because of the great success of the 22 programs. I visited several of them. I think it is one of many things that contributed to what you can see on the open data portal on the police's website, a decline in gunplay over the course of the summer. So I want to make sure that we get this well in front of prospective providers, and also recognize that while I'm very glad that Dr. Hooker has moved into the superintendent's role at the school district, I know the longer, more engaged partnership is going to take some months to finalize. So that's what you're going to see there. And then, yes, Commissioner Houle.
Yeah, I love that you tied that into the police department data, and I would just ask that staff, when thinking about how to go about wording both whatever RFPs go out, but also the data that's collected and comes back to us, to be really looking at that violence prevention component in addition to the youth development, as those two things working in tandem, so that the data we are collecting isn't just about how many kids served and doing what, but it's also about what other parallel data are we seeing around violence or lack thereof and crime or lack thereof.
And 21 is scope of services modification for the Food Bank of Northeast Georgia facility. They've firmed up both cost estimates for that facility as well as the funding stack for it. And so this will just be an iteration of that.
If I might, just
Please.
30 seconds on that. So we had a great meeting with the food bank of late. So as y'all know, the cost escalation has really hammered that project, and the food bank have tried to persevere through that. And so what was initially proposed when we entered this agreement with them, MOU, back last August, was 255,000 square foot buildings in a parking area. The new scope, and so you'll be asked to amend the scope of the MOU to reflect where we are now, is I think a 63,000 square foot building with parking. And the projected cost with everything rolled in is $15.8 million. And that is using a owner's representative staff augmentation that we procured that is different from Jacobs, Skanska, who is backstopping us to make sure that all of this goes well. We mitigate our risk in this venture. So you'll be asked to approve the new scope, and we'll provide you the sources of the funding, and the food bank will pick up everything beyond the grant, like we talked about. And I think Jackson County is also putting in $100,000. We've got a contingency in there that, is sufficient, we think, at this point, hopefully. We're under the gun to get the project done by December of next year. Things have to move very quickly. And so we're looking for your approval so we can finalize the construction documents, put it out to bid, get the contractor on board. This will be a metal building. That's a lead time, so the metal building needs to be ordered. And we have worked with DCA to spend down the grant funds first in the project, and then their match would come at the end, so we can meet the DCA deadline without any concerns there.
Commissioner Hamble.
Just a quick question. So are we doing this because we're changing the scope and we need to do that because of the grant? Or are we changing the scope because they're asking us for money?
Well, I mean, DCA, you have to ratify.
Yeah. Like we did the first time. So now that we changed it, we got to do it, ratify it again.
Yes.
But is there also the question on there about asking us for money or not?
No new ACC funds.
No, staff have been consistent about that, but of course, we never know the will of the commission, and so that came up in the presentation.
Right.
And I think y'all were pretty clear, about where you stood on that. So of their own volition, the food bank came back with a capital stack that did not include any additional funds from the unified government.
Okay.
And also DCA would require that the ACC Gov sign off on the final construction documents. So the other thing you'll be asked to do in the agenda item is authorize the mayor to sign off on those when those are done. And I think the mayor would, probably the JDA, as well as the food bank. It's just, these are things that CDBG requires through DCA. So we're making sure we're dotting all the I's, crossing all the T's.
All right. We have two planning and zoning items, so I am going to relocate, and Planning Director Brad Griffin is going to come forward. After each presentation, there will be an opportunity for public input. All right, look at this. Technology is working for us tonight. We come back to a familiar location, 165 Mill Center Boulevard and 160 and 180 Mellwood Drive. Brad, take us away.
Thank you, Mayor, and I just plan on doing something short on this one. You received a presentation last month. You ultimately chose to hold the item, or you were talking about a CDO, and then we had a glitch with our legal ad that caused it to be held. So this is really just being put back in front of you, one, to meet our public hearing requirements, but also we do have a commission-defined option that Commissioner Poole has been working on. This was an RS8 and CG to RM2 PD, 90 townhomes, 270 units. This was the site plan that you were presented at your last meeting. From a staff standpoint and a plan standpoint, nothing has changed at this point. There would be potential changes in place provided the CDO went through. But as Bruce presented to you at your last meeting, this was recommended for approval by the Planning Commission.
Commissioner Houle, did you want to describe the elements of the CDO? And I don't know if this is a helpful map for you here.
Yeah, thanks. And thanks a lot to planning staff, including Director Griffin, for multiple meetings with me, and also to our attorney's office, and especially Lisa Pappas for her help on this. There's 4 conditions y'all note there. The first is about the width of the alleys. It's basically going to reduce the overall asphalt if and where possible, unless the fire marshal requires that it stay wider on those alleys. So they might, go to 16 feet instead of 20. It does include getting a sidewalk all the way along Jennings Mill Parkway there, including so that southeast corner where there's that triangle that wouldn't otherwise have it. Now it will. There's a lot of kind of technical language in there about trees, but basically what it means is that they're going to plant trees that are a little older and with larger canopies than they would otherwise be required to. And also that they're going to add trees that are not currently included on the binding site plan in those little kind of park spaces you see winding up the middle with the trail. And then the last thing, this is kind of a provision that would ensure that we don't end up in the situation that I've seen at least in other neighborhoods around my district and around Athens, where you end up with a partially completed project and kind of disconnected, disjointed sidewalks across lots and things like that. So this, a way to kind of ensure a safeguard against that is that before they can get more than halfway through this project, they'll have to have built out all those trails and the sidewalks around and things like that. And I think that we're at a good place with that from what I understand from Director Griffin. And I regret that the applicant isn't here tonight to speak to it, but I feel confident in his support of it and that we had a meeting, planning staff, myself and them, and everybody seemed to walk away in agreement. So.
Commissioner Davenport?
Yes, and I spoke with Mr. Griffin earlier today about this, but Commissioner Houle, are you in contact with the developer?
To the best of my ability, yes.
And this is just me being Patrick. I hate the name Mill Row. It just sounds ghetto to me. You would think that's me. I'm sorry, but like something more like you got Jennings Mill across the street. I don't know. Just something I want to plant in your head. I'm sorry.
Yeah, Commissioner Hamby?
Thank you, Mayor. I'm not too concerned about the road name. It fits in with the mill everywhere else. But I appreciate the effort in working on this. I think, if we're looking at missing middle and there's housing all around here, and this I think is especially what we're trying to do with Atlanta Highway and the mall area, I think will fit in nicely with a lot of that. So. That's good, thank you.
Commissioner Link?
Yeah, I want to thank Commissioner Houle for his work on this. I think these somewhat subtle requirements will make a huge difference in the project, and I hope that this will provide some much needed housing stock and begin to make some dent in the housing crisis that we're facing.
One other thing I might note.
Yes.
And thanks, I'm glad people seem happy with it. The playground that's noted on the plan there on the north end of all that trail, the developer did indicate a willingness to bring forward kind of a general concept so we can have that kind of on the record in mind. It's not built into the binding site plan, so there's nothing that requires a playground be, a bigger or lesser playground, but hopefully we'll have a decent sense of that at the next meeting.
All right, we're going to move on to 155 Mitchell Street.
Okay, 155 Mitchell Street is an amendment to a plan development. For those of you that have been up here for a while, you've seen this one before in different iterations. This started back in 2017 with a plan development that was at that point intended to be for adult and senior condominiums. That project was ultimately approved but was never developed. But because of the nature of the plan development zoning on the property, it continues to carry that PD and can only be changed in terms of its scale and scope through this amendment process. So it is an amendment to change it. It is now largely a rental type, student-oriented Project, 163 apartments with 381 bedrooms, ranging from studios all the way up to a few 4s and 5-bedroom units. There is commercial space on the ground, parking for 183 cars, and it is being filed as part of their PD. They are pursuing the inclusionary zoning policies that were adopted as part of the ordinance. Now, historically, when this project has come through or started a process cycle, then had to pull back, there were a lot of waivers associated with it. This inclusionary zoning ordinance has actually allowed them to eliminate several of the waivers. They still have a variance that is in place on the buffer encroachment that remains from probably 2015. And then there's one waiver required for a single driveway access point, and that is to section 925. Subject property here on Mitchell Street, you all are familiar with it. Property is currently zoned commercial downtown PD. This is the existing, or the proposed site plan and some kind of some small elevations. I'll show you a couple bigger ones in a minute. This is a front elevation of the new design of the building. A perspective drawing of it, of what it would look like. And then this was the 2017 approval of the more senior level condos that is currently the plan of record, but they would propose to change it to that type of a design. I mentioned they were doing the inclusionary zoning. They're not asking for the full 25% density increase that is allowed within commercial downtown. They're at about half of that number, about 12% increase. And the way they're proposing to go through the process is very much the way we intended to set it up when it was presented to you, in that they've indicated to you, if approved, that they will follow the policies in the ordinance. They will work through those details with staff as it goes through the permitting process. The development agreement will be done with staff. They will make the decision at that point as to whether or not they're going to try to utilize the 80% AMI or the 60, and then they'll meet the percentages accordingly at the time of permitting. We feel fairly strongly that that is a better way to, we've got an ordinance in place. That's why we were pushing so hard to get it here, so we don't end up, those numbers don't become negotiation points as part of you making a land use decision. They said they'll do it. If you approve it, it is a requirement for them to follow it.
And then an administrative process.
It's an administrative process. So with that, the Planning Commission reviewed it. They feel fairly strongly that it's a logical place for student housing. And so they recommending to you that there were a lot of little tweaks that had to be worked out. The applicants worked all those out. Their recommendation to you is to approve the PD amendment. It will bring with it one condition that is noted in your staff report. It's fairly lengthy. It'll be in your ordinance. It deals with provision of water service and the types of public infrastructure expansions that may be required in order to build the project. If so, they are required to be paid for by the developer, and it's been worded very carefully from our Public Utilities Department in the staff report. So with that, the recommendation is to approve with one condition.
All right. Is there anyone from the public to speak to this item? I see none. It is in District 4. Commissioner Wright.
Mike wanted me to take my time and talk like really long about this. I guess what I wanted to get clarification on, the appendix that was needed for the riparian buffer variance, is that now in the packet? I had read that it was missing at one point. Does that still need to be followed up on?
Appendix.
Yeah.
We may have mentioned that we would provide you information on that old variance that is
Okay,
in place.
so the appendix needed, there was an appendix that was supposed to be in for the, describing the riparian buffer variance that with the original, with the, what do you call it, the plan on record, but yet we wanted to make sure that their version of it is proper.
I will get
Does that
that
make
for
sense?
you. And actually, that because it was in environmental areas, that variance had to be acted on independently. You did not approve that variance. It was approved by the hearings board, and it gave them an allowance of up to 11,000 and some odd square feet of encroachment. this does meet it, but we'll get you a copy of that
Yeah,
old
if that's
variance
included
for-
in the next round, then that way the packet's complete in that respect. And
Yes.
then you're saying that the, where it says ACC Water does not have the capacity, the whole description of them moving it up to an 8-inch and then testing it and the different things that they're all about doing what's needed to be done for that water issue. Is that
They
correct?
are aware of that condition, and the way it's been posed is really a two-step. If they can get the water they need from improvements in William Street, then that will accommodate the condition. If they still don't meet it, then they also have to come up Mitchell Street and do a connection on that end too,
Okay.
as I understand it. Utility engineering requirements, but they'll have to do that as part of their permitting process.
Gotcha. And then, can you follow up with clarification? In one area, it said there was a 1,200 square foot roof amenity, and then another area, it said 7,700 square foot roof amenity. So if you could just,
I'll follow up with you on that.
yeah, follow up on us, so we get clarification. I mean, I love rooftop amenities, don't get me wrong, I just wanted to make sure it was consistent, and maybe, now that I see the towers, it could just be two different locations there. And I really, I think, as you summarize, this is a great example of what the inclusionary zoning stuff that has come forward, because last time this project was coming before us, they were that wave ahead of what was happening, and I really appreciate this company's patience with it, because they wanted to do what we wanted to have done, but we just hadn't gotten there yet, and I think it's
Got the
matched up.
mechanism now.
At this point, it seems like it's matched up in that regard, and I also am supportive of that students also need to work, live, and play in one area, and I think that this does it. Their work on campus, potentially their work in areas around this area, and not needing a car makes this also affordable just in that realm.
Commissioner Link?
I just want to, Brad, can you remind us what the original zoning for this property was? It was rezoned.
Yes, this was RM2.
It was RM2, yeah, so it underwent a drastic upzone, and I don't know if any of y'all remember, it was somewhat controversial, because they promised a senior living facility, senior living condos that would bring diversity to downtown, and I believe there were some votes that were swayed by that condition, and it's come back to us twice, now converted purely to student housing. But I am grateful to see that they're taking advantage of this inclusionary zoning, because that means that it will provide housing for regular working folks. Brad, do you have any idea how many bedrooms of actual, like, moderate income homes that will probably get out of this? I don't know, I might have missed that in your report.
I do, Commissioner. No, because it's not in there yet, it's going to depend on the level of income need that they go after.
Okay.
If they go after qualifications at 60% AMI or less, it's going to provide about 20 beds or about 10 units.
Mhm.
They've got to meet the same
Yeah.
comparable unit mix as what the market rates are. So they can't do all of their affordable in the studios
Yeah,
when
yeah.
they've got other unit mixes.
Yeah.
But if they go after the 80 at 10%, it's 38 beds and roughly 16 dwellings.
Okay. And I'm grateful that we will get some of that housing out of this. And just just like a design nerd aspect, I'm grateful to see buildings designed with cornices and mansard rooftops instead of just the chunky Lego blocks that we're seeing over and over. I mean, I'm grateful to see that there's some traditional element to this design. As I'm not saying it's a beautiful building or anything, but it feels like it's wearing a hat, not just this block soaring into the sky.
And that was something that they were requested to look into by the Planning Commission a long time ago when they initially started their design work.
Good. Thank you.
Doesn't have that interesting visor on it either. Commissioner Houle and Commissioner Denson.
Buildings with hats, y'all. Two questions. The first was, I remember last time this came through, and maybe because they were trying to get ahead of the curve, but there was sort of this bunk beds proposal, which was awkward at best. And I saw on page 6 it said that this is going to increase the population up to 381 people, and then it notes 381 bedrooms. Are we firmly done with the bunk beds approach? Is that safe to assume with this?
I thought about that earlier, Commissioner. It's the inclusionary zoning ordinance as it is currently written does not accommodate for multiple beds in a bedroom as multiple affordable units.
So when we talk about the figure of beds, we really mean bedrooms?
These are bedrooms and apartments, not beds.
Just wanted to make sure we were crystal clear on that. And then the other thing was thinking about this administrative process that's about to finally get used, hopefully, and then also the staff capacity concerns. When we're talking about monitoring it for accountability, not only at initial completion, but in the years ahead, I don't know if staff can maybe give a bit of an explanation, if not tonight, then perhaps at the next meeting on kind of how staff anticipates being able to keep up with that, because hopefully this one is a pilot for more in the future, and just wanting to make sure that our inclusionary zoning ordinance is, to the best of our ability, holding places accountable as management and things can shift. And then I guess maybe this is actually a third question, but parallel to that, I know you spoke about this a bit at the Planning Commission meeting, Brad, but could you kind of talk about how the inclusionary zoning ordinance is going to be utilized when looking at students who, are often there with parental income helping them out?
They will still have to qualify under the same criteria as anybody else in terms of family income. A lot of the evaluation of the AMI percentages, those types of things, and this kind of gets to your earlier question too. The administration of this inclusionary zoning ordinance is not a one-department function. We've got a role in it, as does our HCD department have a role, and they're really much more tailored to those income percentages and follow-up and development agreements. But
I thought I recalled, maybe it wasn't from you, I might be mixing up the people in the room. There was some kind of remark about how they'd be looking at the income of the overall family of the person, or maybe it was like looking at who's signing the leases. There's some way they were going to structure it so that a student couldn't claim to be qualifying because they don't have income, but they've actually got a parent making six figures.
That's my understanding. Is we've talked about some of these other ones too, that income qualifications can't be based on full-time student income. It has to be based on something else. But I'll follow up and get you something on that.
And I'm going to call on Commissioner Denson in a second, but one of the interesting elements of student life in Athens is that I think it's the common assumption that every kid on campus is well-heeled. But if you look at data of the undergrad population, about 17% of undergrads are on Pell Grants. And certainly folks who are in the student support units on campus will also note that every semester there are some kids who are actually homeless who are attending the University of Georgia as an undergrad. So, while this doesn't cover all aspects of our population needs, it does fill a very important role. So, Commissioner Denson.
Thank you, Mayor. And yeah, I'm more excited about this moving forward. Definitely without the bunk beds, as counting as affordable housing. And it's actually funny that before I was on this body, and I think Commissioner Houle also, I advocated against this project because I didn't feel like it was really giving enough community benefit. I was on the other side of the rail. And back then, of course, no affordable housing was included in this. The parking requirements I looked up were more than one parking space per bedroom, way too much parking being relied upon, and just very happy to see this inclusionary zoning ordinance already working, not only to bring about affordable housing, but that they're opting into the parking waiver too for a parking reduction, since it is on Athens Transit's transit line. They can have a reduction, and instead they're going to be at, I think it said, about 0.5 spaces per bedroom for almost half the parking that it was originally aimed at being. So just showing that, I'm just happy to say that this ordinance is doing what we wanted it to, which was to bring about the kind of development that this community deserves and needs right now, which is less auto-centric, more dense, and providing affordable housing. So I'm hoping that this is just the first success out of this ordinance, that we see many, many afterwards. So.
Motion to adjourn.
All right, no other, motion to adjourn.
So moved. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Everybody have a great night.